One of the Dead Sea Scrolls isn't a scroll you can roll at all. It's copper, cold, rigid, hammered with Hebrew letters, and it reads like a checklist of buried treasure: 64 locations, step counts, cubits, weights. If the rest of the scrolls feel like a library, this one feels like a lockbox with instructions taped on top, and that oddity changes how the whole story plays out. Zoom out. The year is 1952, and archaeologists working the cliffs above the Dead Sea open Cave 3 near Qumran. Tucked behind other finds sits a corroded metal roll, technically 2 rolls from the same text. Unlike the parchment and papyrus that make up the other famous scrolls, this one is bronze-green copper alloy, metallized by centuries, brittle like eggshell. And its Hebrew isn't the literary style of Isaiah. It's closer to the everyday language of the Mishnah. Already the outlier is waving a flag. I'm the weird one. Here's the first snag. You can't unroll a copper onion without turning it into confetti. So in 1955 and 1956, Manchester engineer H. Wright Baker does something radical. He coats and carefully saws the roll, turning it into 23 curved plates that finally reveal the letters inside. A researcher films the second cut on October 3, 1955. The first cut happened 2 days earlier. It's delicate, gutsy, and, depending on who you ask, borderline heresy, cutting scripture with a saw. But it worked. And for the first time in 2 millennia, people could read the copper text. What they read did not behave like a normal sacred text. Entry after entry follows a pattern, a general location, a specific marker, a depth to dig, and what to expect. Talents of gold, bars of silver, vessels, sometimes with cryptic Greek letters tacked on. One spot mentions 900 talents of silver, an eye-watering number, even if you argue about how big a talent is. The grammar is dry, almost bureaucratic. If you worked in inventory control, this would feel familiar, and that bureaucratic tone is exactly what divides the room. Is this a literal ledger or a pious fiction meant to encourage a scattered community? Enter Gianmarco Allegro, a young, bold scholar who sees the obvious. If a document looks like a treasure list and talks like a treasure list, maybe it is a treasure list. He clashes with colleagues who think the quantities are impossible or the text is later folklore. The politics get messy. The more he talks publicly about finds and translations, the more the official team freezes him out. Inside a few years, Allegro becomes a lightning rod for a bigger argument: how we handle extraordinary claims when the evidence comes wrapped in corrosion and rumor. He does what any stubborn researcher with a good map and a skeptical committee does. He goes to the field. Allegro traces wadis, stairs cut into bedrock, ruined fortresses that might match the fortress in the Vale of Achor. He follows the trail where the copper text seems to nudge him. He finds features that rhyme with the entries. He does not, however, find vaults bursting with bullion. That gap between textual precision and material payoff is what keeps this story alive. Look closer at the philology and the map. The Hebrew on the copper isn't biblical prose. It's closer to early rabbinic usage, with orthography shaped by being hammered into metal. Scholars date it roughly to the 1st century CE, some pushing just before the Roman destruction of Jerusalem, others after. That matters. If it's before 70 CE, this could be a ledger of deposits moved out of danger. If it's after, it might be a salvage manifest for redistributing assets while the temple lay in ruins. Either way, it lives in the shockwave of war. And those little Greek letters? They may be numeric notes, cross-refs, or something like lot markers. The list sometimes reads like Greek-style temple inventories, which is one reason some experts argue it's authentic as an inventory genre, not just a story. That does not solve the puzzle of the outsized totals, but it suggests the form of the copper scroll aligns with real-world record-keeping we see elsewhere around the Mediterranean. In other words, someone used a normal office tool, an inventory, to do an abnormal thing: hide wealth in a war zone. Now, the most common question: so, where's the treasure? Start with the simplest answer. If a Roman army levels your city and knows there's bullion hidden in hills, it will find creative, even brutal ways to track it down. The empire kept policies about hidden goods and interrogations during wartime. Add 2,000 years of Bedouin prospecting, illicit digging, and normal erosion, and the odds are that much of the stash, if it once existed, moved a long time ago. That's the unromantic reading. It's also the statistically likely one. But the second answer is sneakier. The list itself may have been designed to fragment knowledge. Multiple scribal hands, odd abbreviations, and the way entries hopscotch across districts could be features, not bugs. Each runner knows a piece, nobody knows everything. If so, even having the whole text doesn't guarantee the whole picture. A ledger can be coded without looking coded. Okay, zoom to today. Since 2017, teams have been rappelling into new or long-ignored caves. Cave 12 didn't yield intact scrolls, but did show scroll jars and binding straps, evidence that more caches existed than we thought. In 2021, Israel's Antiquities Authority announced dozens of new biblical fragments from the so-called Cave of Horror, the first such textual finds in about 60 years. In 2023, a separate Judean desert survey turned up 4 Roman swords, eerily well-preserved, likely stashed during the Bar Kokhba era. None of that is the Copper Scrolls treasure. All of it reinforces a simple truth. The desert still hides material that rewrites footnotes, and sometimes big paragraphs of this story. There's also a realism check we can't skip. In 2020, a high-profile museum in Washington, D.C. revealed that all 16 of its Dead Sea Scrolls fragments were modern forgeries. Ouch. Embarrassing, yes, but also a public lesson in why we move carefully with objects that arrive through the antiquities market. The Copper Scroll is genuine. The forgery case isn't about it. But the scandal changed the tone around fragment claims. It pushed more work into open imaging, rigorous provenance, and repeatable science. That's healthy for a field that thrives on big claims. Speaking of open imaging, the Leon Levy Dead Sea Scrolls Digital Library puts multispectral, high-resolution plates online so scholars and you can zoom in on minute letter forms. Pair that with earlier restoration campaigns that rephotographed and conserved the copper plates. And we're now in an era where rereadings are normal. Texts don't change, but our eyes do when the pixels get sharper. In a fight between legend and ledger, better pixels move the needle. So what's the smartest way to read the Copper Scroll without falling into hype? A useful approach, argued in scholarship, is to step past the all-real versus all-fiction binary. Treat it as an inventory genre tied to a crisis context, except that some numbers may be rhetorical or in a different weight standard. Model how communities under pressure hide assets across multiple jurisdictions. Map the entries not only to toponyms, but to logistics, water access, patrol lines, sight lines from known forts. When you run that model, the Copper Scroll stops being a Hollywood treasure map and becomes a risk management document for people trying to keep their world afloat. And what about Allegro, the man who bet his career on treasure as text? History didn't reward him with gold, but time has been kinder to his central instinct. The copper plates aren't random fantasy. Most specialists today accept that we're looking at an inventory of real deposits, even if the full scale and provenance are debated. The desert did not hand Allegro a jackpot. It handed him enough matches between words and places to keep the hypothesis alive. In research, that counts. Why this matters now is bigger than one scroll. We keep finding new pieces in those cliffs. We keep catching forgeries. We keep building better imaging pipelines. Every step nudges us toward a culture where big claims are welcomed. But only if the map, the metallography, the paleography, and the field notes all point the same way. That's not anti-adventure. It's how you keep real discoveries from getting drowned out by loud ones. So here's the loop closing, with one door left open. The Copper Scroll remains the strangest member of an already strange family. A metal ledger that looks like a list of stashes scattered across a landscape shaken by war. Some might be emptied. Some might be misdirection. Some might be waiting under a stone shelf that nobody's climbed to yet. The text won't change. Our tools will. And that's the quiet promise of this mystery. It rewards patience as much as it tempts obsession. Which of these possibilities actually holds up when you line them against the evidence? Was the Copper Scroll a wartime ledger, a no-nonsense accounting of precious metals and sacred vessels spirited away in the chaos of Jerusalem's fall? Or was it a coded community inventory, deliberately fragmented so that no single person could ever reconstruct the full map, insurance against betrayal or capture? Or could it be something subtler still, a literary construct, a work of symbolic geography that borrows real place names to anchor a moral or religious message without ever expecting someone to dig holes in the desert? Each theory fits some of the puzzle pieces and leaves others on the table, and the frustrating truth is that 2,000 years later, the scroll still refuses to tell us which lens to use. That's why it's less a solved mystery and more an open invitation, part history, part riddle, and part dare to anyone convinced they can be the one to crack it. The map is on the table. Your move.